everyone, and welcome to another Space Innovation Talks. I'm your host, Bill Wolf, the president and founder of the Space Force Association, and we are so honored to have with us Mr. Gabe Mounce, who is the director of the Space Force Accelerator program. Mr. Mounce, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill.
I mean, there's a lot of things happening in the space domain and a lot of discussion around agility with regard to innovation and how quickly we can move towards what we know the warfighters need to ensure space dominance in support of our national security objectives. So this is just a great opportunity to talk with you today about what you're working on. To that end, could you provide just a little bit of background about how you ended up in your current position and what your career has entailed?
Sure. So I am a long-term, if you will, Air Force member. I started out on active duty with the Air Force. I spent about 12 years on active duty as an Air Force officer, working as you know, across many different assignments that ran the gamut from, typical acquisitions, in the acquisition career field, as you were. So I had some logistics center experience, some test experience, some SPO experience, if you will, and some lab experience. And then decided for a variety of reasons to transition and take a different step in my career. And I transitioned off of active duty, I have a foot in the door still as a reservist with the Air Force, but in the private sector side, if you will, I was able to join the Air Force Research Lab. I got very fortunate and got picked up when I transitioned off active duty. So that's where I work now for the Air Force Research Lab. The space vehicles piece of that research lab. The Air Force Research Lab, if you don't know, is the research lab that supports both the Air Force and the Space Force. It's a geographically dispersed lab. So there are basically technology directorates. Sometimes I refer to it as tech centers across the country. And two of those directorates are here on Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. One's focused on space, one's focused on directed energy. I work on the space side of the house mainly, and was doing a lot of kind of space science and technology research, in that capacity. And eventually, mainly it just kind of happenstance, but partly I think because I'm a enthusiast when it comes to startup communities in the commercial sector, I was able to be involved with a kind of a new experiment, if you will, on how the government, in this case, how does the Air Force, now the Space Force, how can we better interact with the commercial sector? I got involved with a cadre of young company-grade officers in the Air Force that were very ingenious, just really innovative, who decided to pilot this idea of using a technology business accelerator, like what you might find out in the wild. One of these things that you see venture capitalists sometimes using to accelerate businesses toward a particular market. The idea is, could we use that same approach to help the Air Force Space Force connect to the commercial sector? So really piloted that program. Some of that work then fed into and informed what then became AFWorks. And then from that point on behalf of the Air Force Research Lab for the Space Vehicles Directorate piece of it, I run this official program. We are using two technology accelerators, one in Colorado Springs called the Catalyst Space Accelerator, and then one here in Albuquerque called the Hyperspace Challenge, both variations on a theme when it comes to these business accelerators, to enable companies, mainly startup companies, to come into a cohort, usually a 3-month cohort, and basically accelerate their interactions with the Space Force and Air Force to discover problem sets and really to understand how does their product or service fit to the mission sets that we have for those two services.
Yeah, that's exciting. And it's so great that the Space Force is taking a lesson from AFWorks and saying, hey, this is a great model. Let's replicate it. We had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to speak with Mr. Brian Mao, who helped found the AFWorks program. So his insights were extremely beneficial. And of course, we had the opportunity to speak with Colonel Felt just a couple weeks ago as well. So it's great to basically summarize everything that's happening in AFRL with regard to innovation and collaboration. So getting right to it, the thing coming up in the future is Space Force Pitch Day. Can you explain a little bit about what is the Space Force Pitch Day?
Yeah, so the Pitch Day approach really was pioneered by the AFWorks office. It was pioneered really underneath our previous senior executive for acquisition, Dr. Roper, under the Air Force. The idea of really, can we create an opportunity for companies to come in and literally pitch their product or service to us? And then as we, evaluate those pitches, try to make on-the-spot awards, right? So part of the process was internally focused to see if we could drive down the cost of doing business, I should say, with the Air Force. How could we make it easier for that commercial sector to work with us? And probably that was by making, using the SBIR, the Small Business Innovative Research Program. Could we modify it to allow us to make faster awards that we could then make at these pitch days? And so that's been going on for a few years now. And the Space Force Pitch Day is just really a derivative of that work. So for the U.S. Space Force, the way we're using it now is it's really a good initiative to help us demonstrate in the Space Force side a faster, smarter strategy to create or to invest in technology and in these partnerships with this startup community, non-traditional business community, if you will. And that's mainly in part because I think this is kind of well known. The space market is very robust right now. A lot of innovation happening out in that market on the commercial side. Space Force, of course, very interested in how can we utilize that technology for our mission sets. And this is just one way we're getting after bringing that ecosystem, if you will, that community into the fold of the Space Force.
That's definitely a lot of work that you're undertaking with regard to trying to comb the civil market to determine what technologies should be brought into and support the Space Force challenges, which brings up really a really important point, I think, which is how do these events specifically support the space warfighter?
Yeah, so basically it's helping us really find capabilities that probably we are not quite aware of in that commercial sector that might be adopted for what we have as mission sets within the Space Force. So as we're pursuing the different mission sets for national security using the space domain, how then can we understand what other innovations happening in that commercial sector and bring them to bear for our mission sets? So that's really what we're doing in a sense for the warfighter. We definitely still have sort of an internal line of technology development, if you will. I guess within the metaphor we sometimes use is inside the fence, right? Definitely a lot of research and development still happening within the government sector, but a lot of that innovation is happening out on the commercial side. So this is all about how do we take the problem sets we're seeing, in some cases from, as derived from official requirements that come down from the top level leadership of the Air Force, of the Space Force, and in other cases, even ferreted out from our actual operators who are operating these satellites for our mission sets, and kind of feed them into this pitch day approach, where we then invite companies to pitch toward those mission sets. Some of the things we're particularly looking at, some of the focus areas specifically the Space Force is interested in, are some of the things you might find typical for what we've been working on for a while, such as early missile detection and warning, of course, space domain awareness, space communications, but even going kind of the opposite direction into more advanced capabilities that we're really interested in, such as multi-domain command and control, data mining, artificial intelligence, responsive launch systems, for instance, space logistics. As the domain of space gets utilized more, not just by the countries, the various countries around the world, such as the US, but also, on the government side, but also by the commercial side, there's going to be a lot more activity in space. So some of these more modern or more near-term things are really important to us, such as logistics and launch systems, artificial intelligence, and the like. So the pitch day is helping us address those particular needs by trying to help understand and find out what's happening in the commercial sector that can be brought to bear to those sets.
That is a lot of work, and I'm sure requires quite a bit of customer discovery, trying to look across the space domain with our obviously our coalition partners and our allies and around the globe, and really looking out as well to our combatant commands. And so could you quickly or briefly get into customer discovery? What are you doing to try to figure out what the customer needs, who the customers are, and what do they need?
Yeah, so part of this program, the Pitch Day program, is, and we have evolved it over the years, partly based on what the work that was, the ground that was tilled by AFWorks originally, plus some of the work I do, in fact, in the accelerator programs that we run, was basically curating problem sets from the government side. So in that evolution, what we've been able to do then is attach to the Pitch Day essentially a component that we call, a bevy, a cadre of individuals that we call Sherpas. They're basically liaisons, government individuals, either active duty military, government civilians, that can then bridge the gap between the companies that come to us and the actual mission owners, to help ferret out, first and foremost, what are those problem sets that we bring into the Pitch Day, but then later, as part of the program, one of the things we do is run an official kind of 3-month customer discovery program, very similar to what you might find out in the wild with a normal accelerator program, where we have a curriculum that enables us to connect the companies to these end users. So that curriculum involves workshops to understand some of the problem sets. It involves some other training on what are the opportunities that the government offers through our normal contracting mechanisms. And so in that curriculum, we bake a little bit more formally this process to allow the companies to learn more about the government so that they understand better how they can enter into these contracting agreement mechanisms and provide us these pitches for solutions. But at the end of that 3 months, we try to make sure that happens before the Pitch Day, sort of as an acceleration component that then leads up to the Pitch Day, so that when they get to the actual Pitch Day, or at least the opportunity to apply into the SBIR program for the Pitch Day, they have done all that groundwork ahead of time to understand what the mission sets are.
That is exciting news for sure. And I remember one of the last things I worked on before I retired from 14th Air Force, which is now known as SPOC West. There was a concept that was being developed to talk about how to connect to the space warfighter. And the concept was the combat development teams. And so could you talk a little bit about how the combat development teams are helping to inform the process that you're describing?
Yeah, so the combat development teams in general, like you said, the way they have kind of been stood up is they consist of our operators, our space warfighters, which are really the guys on the mission operations floors, the guys really operating our space assets. We have those guys involved in the team. We also have a lot of times our acquisition professionals, such as a majority of the staff that exist in Los Angeles at the Space and Missile Systems Center, soon to become the Space Systems Command. Those folks, the acquirers, we call them sometimes, are brought into those teams. And now as well, those members of our sort of outreach team, if you will, these teams that are working on the Pitch Day, that are about reaching out to the commercial sector, they make up these teams. And then through those combat development teams, as we listen essentially to what the operators, how they're working and what are the sort of problem sets that come up in that operation, that is what then kind of evolves into some of the problem sets. Sometimes we even refer to them as pain points, kind of a wording that's used, a dialogue that's used more applicable to the outside defense discussion. But we work with those teams and then these Sherpas to then be able to meet the companies, right, to work with the companies through this customer discovery process that I described earlier, to really kind of make that connection. A lot of this turns out to be very relational in nature, right? So the CDTs, along with the Sherpas, working through that customer discovery process, it's all about kind of forming those relationships as we look and scout the technology and the companies providing that technology, so that we can really better understand both sides of the coin. What's really needed, what is really this problem on one hand, and then what is this capability that you are offering to us.
Thank you. And we do have attendees on the line now. And so if folks have questions for Mr. Mounce, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A section. And I'm sure there's plenty of questions that folks have because, again, developing the technology rapidly to deliver to space warfighters is really what you're talking about. And taking the AFWERX model and then applying it with Space Force understanding and knowledge is really the critical piece so that we can deliver those capabilities. Now, transitioning just a little bit, how is the DoD able to fund an event like Pitch Day?
Yeah, so we are using mainly and leveraging, as I said earlier, the Small Business Innovative Research Program, right? So that's a program that exists across the federal government sector. Each agency utilizes this. It's basically a budget that's set aside for small businesses that then gets funneled through this program to make specific awards for small businesses for the purposes of development of technology, and in the case that we're using, kind of evolving that concept towards adapting and adopting commercial technology. So the budget comes from that SBIR program mainly. The way that we are utilizing the SBIR program now, according to the way AFWERX evolved and the way we are utilizing it in Pitch Day, is companies can apply for this Pitch Day SBIR Phase 1. We've created a special topic for the SBIR Pitch Day. It's a Phase 1, Phase 2 approach, where the Phase 1 is about $50,000 that they get on that award. And on that award, part of it is to do this customer discovery process that I described. And then if they've made some traction in that customer discovery with the government side, meaning they can exhibit interest, usually by a memo that's signed by the customer, the government customer side, they can apply for a Phase 2 where they get a bigger dollar amount to go into that process. So for this Pitch Day in particular, we had a call where companies were invited to pitch to the Pitch Day topic. If they were selected, they got the Phase 1 award, and they were able to compete for this Phase 2 award under Pitch Day. And then we vetted those companies to come into Pitch Day. So what's going to happen during the Pitch Day in a couple of weeks is the companies who have come in and have that Phase 1 award will be pitching now what their product or service is, how does it apply to our problem set, and to essentially be eligible to get a Phase 2 contract, which is upwards of $1.7 million. And that money comes from both this SBIR program that's already set aside by the federal government at the top level, as well as some Space Force funding that comes through the Space and Missile Systems Center and their acquisition funding pipeline. Some funding has been set aside in their program, overarching program scheme, to apply to these Phase 2 contracts as well.
Thank you, sir. I suspect that it's too late for a company to get involved in this Pitch Day, but I do want to clarify. And if it is too late for companies to get involved in this Pitch Day, by the way, this is one of the audience questions. And how does one get involved? How does a company get involved in future Pitch Days?
Yeah, so you're right. It is for this particular upcoming Pitch Day, it's too late necessarily to enter what I call a pipeline, enter that pipeline for the particular Pitch Day event that's happening next couple of weeks. But what has been the plan and the way we have followed suit with the way AFWERX has been running their SBIR program is when we get ready to do another cycle of pitches, it will be largely tied to one of the 3 SBIR cycles that typically occur every year. And so usually that cycle, this is roughly speaking, it's usually like spring, summer, fall, where you'll see a call go out to say, hey, here's the next opportunity to apply for a SBIR. We'll probably try to attach the pitch day to one of those calls. Yet indeterminate right now which of the next calls that will happen with, but in the future it will be attached to those one of those calls.
Understand. Thank you. That answers it. I know that the follow-on question is, okay, how do we find out more about Pitch Day? Who do folks contact? If we have companies that want to help out, is there a website they should go to? Is there a POC they should talk to? What is the best way to get involved?
Yeah, so we have a website out there specifically for the Space Force Pitch Day, and it's spaceforcepitchday.com. So it's pretty easy to get to, and you guys can validate it out there in virtual land to make sure I'm telling you the right thing. But that's the main webpage we've created so that you can at least learn about the opportunities and how to get involved.
Oh, thank you so much. And going back a little bit to the CDTs, there's a question from the audience who is asking, would you characterize the role of the acquisition personnel serving on CDTs as more of a product management capability than acquisition program management?
Yeah, I mean, we actually try to make as many, let me rephrase it. We try to invite into the CDTs, or at least the powers that be that are creating the CDTs, trying to make sure they consist of as diverse sort of a representation across that, what I consider to be sort of the procurement pipeline. And in my mind, I call it a pipeline, but what I mean by that is we sort of, I think of it at the end of this pipeline is sort of the fielding perhaps of a capability that then is operated, executed and operated by the space operators, the warfighters. So we definitely have to have that operational element in it. But then along that pipeline, there's different touch points where you have acquisition personnel involved. So we do try to make sure that those teams are made up of those represented people, career paths, if you will. They vary. Not all the teams are the same, but we do try to have program managers, the staffs of program managers from legitimate programs in there, as well as perhaps R&D folks, maybe from the research labs and others involved in that CDT process.
Oh, that's perfect. And again, it is about connecting capability to the warfighter, which is exactly what you're talking about. To that end, I'm going to go ahead and give a shameless plug to the SFA's Space Warfighter Industry Nights, which we're executing the first week in October during the Space Force Weapons and Tactics Conference to help show space warfighters what industry is working on. So we're inviting our corporate members to come to Colorado Springs and display the types of technology that they're working on in order to support exactly what you're talking about. Another question from the audience. This one is from someone we both know. This is Colonel Darren Shades Buck. He says, "Hey, Gabe, great to see you. Can you please talk about any considerations for allies and mission partners in rapid agile development, specifically relative to C2 and information sharing?"
Yeah, so there is a lot of work going on, and I would say probably right adjacent to what we're doing in this particular pitch day activity, because we're leveraging SBIR for the pitch day activity. At this point in time, that SBIR process does not really quite allow for the involvement of, let's say, international companies. So if that's where the question is going, is how do we bring benefit perhaps from the international industry space? We haven't quite baked that into this new process where SBIR feeds into the pitch day. But having said that, there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes to understand what are other mechanisms by which we can work with companies that may be in the foreign space, because like I said, there's a lot of innovation happening across the globe, quite frankly, in the space industry, and we definitely want to take advantage of that. So those mechanisms may not be baked into a future pitch day per se, but you might see opportunities such as like what I run in the accelerators. In our accelerator program, we're not necessarily, because we're working through more of a customer discovery component, companies we bring in are not really on official government contracts per se. They're really just working with us to understand, how does this product or service that I might have on the commercial side fit? And so in many cases, we have been able to bring in some foreign companies to look at, so for us to look at what technology they have, but also to kind of work out what is the right mechanisms that we might have in place to work with those companies. And that's really still evolving. At the same time, we have other programs, like I said, right adjacent to this, where we've been working with foreign, the international community when it comes to governments, such as the International Space Pitch Day that was recently held last summer with, in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense. In fact, one of my colleagues, one of the folks that helped me found and develop the Space Force Accelerators, a young captain, went on his an international tour where he was specifically working with the Ministry of Defense to stand up that particular pitch day. And that was a combo between Space and Missile Systems Center and the Ministry of Defense to run that accelerator toward more international startup, companies. So both from an international agency standpoint and an international kind of industry standpoint.
Great, thank you. Who can pitch at Pitch Day? Can any company pitch, or are you focused on specific companies?
So because we're using the SBIR process, we're looking at small companies. So as defined by the Small Business Innovative Research Program, I think that's mainly a company that's 500 employees or less. So that's one of the main criterias. But then, you have to apply for one of these phase one SBIRs to get into the pipeline. And then that's how you get brought in, is based on that initial vetting to bring your product or service to bear to the pitch. So if you are a small business, and as long as you meet kind of those definitions of what a small business is and other requirements for a SBIR, then you're able to be considered for a pitch day. For this particular one, as I said earlier, for this particular one, we've already gone through that process of down selecting those companies through that phase one. But in the future, it would be confined to those companies that meet that criteria for a SBIR.
It sounds like a exciting time. I remember going to an AFWorks pitch day and seeing the excitement around that. And it really was, basically a theatrical approach to the capabilities that are being developed and demonstrated. Who can show up? I mean, I think you probably be able to sell tickets pretty easily if you needed to, but is it a thing that anyone can show up to, or is it limited to a specific audience?
Well, the way we're running the pitch day this time around, and a lot of it, as you might guess, because of still remnants of COVID, is virtual. We're running it on the 18th and 19th of August. There will be sort of an in-person component of that where we actually receive the actual pitches from the companies. That mainly will happen on the 18th of August in Los Angeles at the aerospace campus there, right adjacent to the Space and Missile Systems Center. That's really sort of a closed door session. But on the 19th, that's where we're hosting our public event, which will be open to the public. There will be an in-person opportunity as well as mainly the virtual opportunity. So if you go to spaceforcepitchday.com, you'll be able to see in that website where you can go and register for that event on the 19th. And it mainly runs from 9 a.m. to about 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon on the 19th. And in that, it's going to be basically programming that takes place where we'll have a keynote speaker, we'll have several panel discussions from both sort of the government perspective and from the industry perspective. In fact, one of the panels, I'll be moderating a panel on the venture capital side of this process, which has to do with how does the investment side of the commercial sector get involved in a pitch day approach? And I guess as an aside, the way they do that in a nutshell is using the SBIR process. Some of the companies can compete for an opportunity to go to this larger award opportunity that we call StratFi. And the StratFi basically is a matching program that allows companies, if they have the right mission fit, as demonstrated through the process, they receive not only SBIR funding at a higher dollar amount, they can receive, and typically part of the vetting process is that they have garnered some private investment to go into that StratFi award. But we'll have some discussions like that at the piece of the event that's happening on the 19th.
Okay, and so what you're telling me is I can go sign up. I can go to spaceforcepitchday.com, sign up, and watch on the 19th everything that's going on. Can you give us any insight into who might be speaking and other panels that might be executing during that time?
Yeah, so we will have a keynote by some members from Space and Missile Systems Center. We'll have a government panel, which will talk to, and in fact, we'll have the leader of one of the leaders of our program here running Pitch Day, Colonel Rock McMillan, will make an announcement there that I think will be interesting to a lot of the folks in the space domain. So I encourage you to go and register just to see that announcement. And then we'll have some of these other panel sessions that discuss the different elements of what's happening within the new Space Force innovation ecosystem.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like an exciting time. Sir, I can't thank you enough for taking time. Is there anything else you'd like to add about Space Force Pitch Day and other mission sets in your portfolio?
Just that we are super excited to be able to host this event and be able to kind of interact with the commercial sector, and hoping to see a lot of folks come through on the 19th so that we can just basically develop further relationships with folks interested in what we're doing on the Space Force innovation side.
It's exciting times for sure, and everything you're doing is critical to our national security space objectives. So thanks for what you're doing, sir, and thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with the Space Force Association. And part of our objective is to spread the word about all the good news that is happening in the space domain. So, sir, thanks again for your time, and have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Bill.